Yeah. Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you all very much for coming to the session. I'm told we will have lunch at 12:15. It's coming, supposedly, so we'll have a quick break and let you get some lunch. I'm Louise Bunce. I think I actually know most of you here, but I don't know a couple of you. So we've got people from different subjects, and we've got psychology, architecture, who else have we got? Sport. Whereabouts are you? Which department are you in?
Sport
as well. And what about you? Medicine? Yeah? Okay. So we've got an interesting range of disciplines here. So I'm going to be talking about defining students as consumers. This is something that I've been researching for a couple of years now. And look at how it impacts on what we do in terms of teaching and learning and how it affects student motivation. I should also say thank you to Naomi for coming today, because she's been involved in some of the research I'll be talking about later on, so you can chip in if you want to when I'm talking about that. So I'm sure you're all aware of the kind of context of higher education in terms of the contribution that the government has traditionally made to student fees, which was traditionally they paid universities the whole cost for students to study here. But increasingly over the last 20 years, students have become now solely responsible for the cost of their tuition at university. So this raises the question of whether this has kind of created a new student identity. In 1997, the Deering report into higher education first kind of used the label of students as customers or consumers, saying that there's now a greater emphasis on students in this way. And most recently, in the formation of the Office for Students, one of their 4 key objectives is ensuring students have value for money. So this really is an important part of now shaping kind of new student identity in this kind of fee-paying environment. So let's just start with what a consumer is. So a consumer is someone who pays something to consume goods and services, and they're protected by the Consumer Rights Act. And the section of this act, if you read through it, a lot of it is not relevant for universities, but actually the bit that we come under is the poor service. So if we offer poor service, then students have a right under this act to complain. However, there's lots of reasons why this doesn't really, why defining students as consumers doesn't really sit within an education framework. Education can't be seen as a product in the same way that other consumer goods can be seen as a product. So, for example, the customer isn't always right. Students don't always know what they need to know. What students want isn't necessarily the same as what we think they might need. More often than not, education is a one-off transaction. It's not like with supermarket brands where they want you to go back week on week. So it's a one-off transaction. And I think most importantly, most obviously, is that the nature of the student themselves will affect the product that they come out with at the end of their degree. So there's lots of ways in which seeing students as consumers doesn't quite fit with a traditional view of education. Even Socrates warned against charging money for education. He argued that if students pay for education, then all it creates is merchants of knowledge. So universities become these merchants or businesses that will simply give consumers or customers what they want rather than what they need, because their sole aim is to stay in business. So again, lots of reasons why this metaphor doesn't quite sit right with traditional education. So I'm going to get you to do a little bit of thinking now. So we've got on the one hand students as consumers and students as learners. So just what attitudes and behaviours do you think that we might expect if students are identifying as consumers? Have you seen any examples of things in the classroom or in interactions with students where they're identifying as consumers or learners? So do you want to give any examples or? What do you think?
Wanting or feeling their grades should reflect the effort they put in as opposed to...
Yes, that's a good one. So as a consumer, a student thinks, well, I'll put some effort in so I should get a good grade, even if they haven't necessarily mastered the academic content of something, but I think if they've put some effort in, they should get a good grade. Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else?
Students calculate how much each of costs.
Yes, how much each contact time is worth. So I paid £100 for this lecture and I don't think it's very good, am I? Yeah, okay, that's another consumer attitude. Yeah.
We had the issue last year when they shut the library at Brooks.
Or when they shut the library because of the
and
snow.
there was all this thing about how much money should I be entitled to as a refund if I couldn't access the library this year. And
Yep.
someone was phoning up on Radio 2 making that point. So
Right, okay.
the consumer mind
Mhm.
orientation.
Any others?
Around expectations, so how many face-to-face sessions you would have? Or
Okay, yeah, so
maybe not
contact
single
hours.
of different types of feedback or learning methodologies.
Yeah, so kind of thinking that, you know, I'm paying all this money, therefore I should have the lecturer's attention, face-to-face attention all the time. Okay, there's some good ones. So I'll show you some of the things that we might see students doing or their attitudes. So maybe if they're acting like a consumer, feel entitled, want to avoid challenging concepts, take things more at face value rather than engaging in critical thinking, might take a more surface or superficial approach to learning rather than wanting to engage with the intellectual content and think more creatively, might see their degree as a means to an end rather than as a process to just enrich their knowledge. Might be more likely to complain, whereas if they're learners might be more this kind of feel privileged rather than feeling entitled. So do you recognise these two identities in your students? So what do you think? Do you think most students identify as learners, most as consumers, or there's a mix? So hands up for A. Nobody. Hands up for B. Nobody. C. Okay, so everyone thinks, yeah, there's a mix in cohorts. Well, let's see now what some of the research says. So I've conducted two surveys now of over 1,000 students studying in England, with the aim of seeing whether students identify as consumers of their education and to look at whether their identity impacts on how they're approaching their teaching and learning, or their learning practices. So the first one has already been published in Studies in Higher Education. That's open access, so you can download that for free, and the other one is currently under publication process. So in this survey we used a consumer identity survey developed by Saunders, who was working in the United States, and students they responded to 18 items rating their level of agreement with these types of things to rate the extent to which they identify as a consumer of their education. So those are some example items that they had to rate. Then we also developed a kind of learner identity measure to, do come in please, yeah, if you want to take it through, thanks. To kind of look at the opposite identity, to see how much they're identifying as a learner, how much they want to engage in deep learning, etc. We also used the approaches to learning questionnaire in the second study in order to look at whether students were taking a surface or a deep approach to learning. So those are some example items there. And again, they rate their level of agreement with those items. And then we looked at their academic performance as well. So this is just some of the characteristics of the sample. There's about 650 undergraduates in each survey, studying in England across a whole variety of different subjects and from different universities. Predominantly white female students took part, mean age of 21. And we had a nice spread of students from both across the first years, across all years of study. So a fairly broad sample there. So we wanted to look at the extent to which students identify as consumers or learners of their education. So I've plotted the results of Survey 1 and Survey 2 on the graph here. So the purple line at the bottom shows that their consumer identity has kind of increased slightly over the 2 years we did the survey, and learner identity has decreased. So what the scale is showing is that so learner identity, the green line here. So in the first survey, students were generally agreeing or strongly agreeing that they identified as learners of their education. This dropped slightly in the second survey we did. And in terms of the consumer identity, actually they were kind of generally disagreeing, but fairly towards the neutral line. So they weren't accepting a consumer identity, but they weren't wholeheartedly rejecting it either, which is interesting. Then we look specifically at what the characteristics are of students who do identify more strongly as consumers than other students. In both surveys we found that, interestingly, students who were studying a STEM subject, so science, technology, engineering or maths subject, identified more strongly as consumers. And part of this reason might be because STEM subjects, you could argue, tend to focus on things like dentistry, medicine, science, and they tend to be more kind of fact-based subjects. So possibly students are more inclined to take excuse me, a more kind of superficial approach if they're just engaging in learning facts rather than...
Would it be fact-based or job-based?
Oh, that's interesting.
I was going to ask,
Yes, it could be.
I was going to ask that, is there a thing like medicine, architecture, you have to get that qualification? So is
So
there...
it's a means to an end.
Is it, you know,
Oh.
is there a different thing subject, like some people will come to university, they want a degree. There are other people that if I want to become A, I need
a professional qualification.
I need a professional qualification. I just wonder if
So
that...
you might find within the STEM subjects, if it you quite,
Yeah.
say, a stepping stone that's necessary in that field.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that. That's a good, yes, that's a good point.
So she comes out
Yeah.
in the media,
Yeah.
especially the arts and humanities students, because the funding is being severely cut for a lot of arts and humanities courses, and students are going into some of these fields because of their level of subject. They are posting online things like, well, I know I might not get a career after this, but I'm just going into it because of my great passion for what I'm studying, English literature, whatever. And they're reflecting on this and saying, well, I know this is quite unusual, given that we're having to pay the fees, but what they seem to be putting over is something quite different to what we came up with our student as consumer research. And so I think somebody going in for it because they want to get a degree and get a job, I think they would be more likely to see themselves as consumers.
Yeah. We also, as part of the survey, asked students about their general involvement in university life. We found that students that were more involved, so they did things like belong to a sport, belong to a university, a student union society, or were a student rep on their course, were less likely to identify as consumers. But then in the other surveys, we got mixed findings regarding gender, age, and employment status. So in one of the surveys, we found that it was associated with identifying more as a consumer, and another survey as less. So there's less clear-cut results about the effect of age and gender and having a job alongside your studies. And we also found in survey 2, we also looked at whether students complaining and the extent to which they complained about their course. And that was higher among student consumers in the second survey. Right, so this is a good time to get the sandwich, and then we can think about this, the questions on this slide while we perhaps grab a sandwich. So what's the impact of consuming learning on academic performance? What do you think? Do you think it kind of makes academic performance worse, or maybe makes academic performance better? So should we grab a sandwich and then answer this question? Okay, so quick hands up. Who thinks that it makes academic performance worse? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, about 6 of you. Does it make academic performance better?
I'm in both sides of that.
Okay. So a couple of you, 3 of you, so not so sure. Maybe not. So what we found was an association between the amount that students identify as a consumer and poorer academic performance. So the more they agreed with those consumer items and identified as a consumer, the poorer their level of academic performance. So, yeah, go on.
It's self-reported, right?
Yes, it was self-reported academic performance. Because ideally we would have got their actual kind of GPA or something, but because we did such a wide survey, we couldn't get academic records of those students who took part. So we asked students to report what was their most recent grade for a piece of work.
You have to look at what's perhaps their A-level entry, because you might say a 2-2 is not good, but maybe that would be good for that individual's ability.
Yeah, but that wouldn't explain, I don't think that would explain the link between identifying as a consumer and their performance. Yeah, I think if we were to do, in the future it would be ideal to do a more focused survey on students from which hopefully Adam, we can try and do at Brooks, where we actually get students' GPA from the system and compare that to their consumer identity. So the second survey looked at, well, why is it that, or why might identifying as a consumer have this negative impact on academic performance? And we thought maybe that it has an impact on how students approach their learning. So what we found was that students who identify more strongly as consumers are more likely to take a surface approach to learning, which is just the kind of superficial memorising facts in order to pass a test, and we're avoiding taking a deep approach to learning. So a deep approach to learning is one where you want to engage with the material, be critical about it, and try and make meaning from it. So what do you think we can do about this? Perhaps because there's a smaller number of us, we can just have a more open discussion altogether. So what can we do about this? So if students are, they're paying high levels of tuition fees, or at least through the student loan system. Students who identify as consumers are less likely to want to engage in difficult content in class, more likely to just want to learn stuff in order to pass a test. And therefore they're more likely to do less well than students who have a higher learner identity. So what are the things that we're going to think about? First of all, what can you do as individual teachers, standing in the front of a class with 30 or 50 or 100 students, or as an academic advisor, and what might the university also do in terms of the kind of campus environment? So should we start with the first one?
So just before we get to
yeah.
this question, so did you check whether the effective consumer attitude was completely explained by, or mostly explained by, the surface learning, or is that just a hypothesis that it could be? So we did a mediation analysis and found that surface learning mediated the relation between identifying as a consumer and academic performance, and not the other way around. Yeah, so we did find, that's what we found. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you do when students say to you, oh, well, I was paying for this and the library was shut because of the snow, or this lecture cost me £100, or...
You can have a few things in front of it and just say, look, you might have this mindset and stuff like that, and you know that that's understandable, so you can empathise a bit with them, but then explain that it's not that, explain that tuition fees change nothing for universities, apart from where the money came from, rather than from them. So I think we try to preempt almost that mindset as much as possible. But then some people try and twist it to their advantage or to our advantage by saying, well, look, come for tutorials, ask for help, that's what we're here for. So they're actually saying, well, look, these are the things you get for that, which actually I think most of students now do a lot more of that kind of engaging outside of just coming to lectures and seminars, if you say that's part of the deal.
Part of what you're paying for.
Might be interesting to see whether these consumer service learners are the ones that are less likely to attend, especially the optional sessions such as revision sessions. We had good attendance this semester in practical sessions apart from the mock exam.
Oh, that's great. It doesn't make sense, does it?
Because the rest was all geared towards a piece of coursework.
Yeah, but then a mock exams also similarly, I found that I've got a class of 30 students, and in preparation for the exam, I said, I'll happily look at, because 30 students, and I thought, well, if 30 students send me a draft, I can just about cope with reviewing that. 2 students took me up on the offer of sending me something to get written feedback on it, and that was me offering. So I'm surprised at sometimes how little students, even though they've got this mindset of, wanting to get value for money and paying for things, and actually sometimes when you do offer them opportunities, they then don't always take them either. So it's kind of this, they don't want to have to put the effort. I think it's about not wanting to put the effort in and just thinking, well, I just want to get this degree with a minimum effort, but that's kind of at odds with paying for us and wanting our time, isn't it? Yeah.
Very often I teach predominantly paramedic students across the spectrum, and very much the conversation tends to veer. It's coming to, well, I couldn't get in, or yeah, the library was shut, and all those similar sort of things. What we tend to have a conversation around is who do you think is responsible for your education? To try to kind of turn it into actually, because there's such a lot of self-directed work anyway. And I always say, and it's how you negotiate when things don't work, is as much as when they do your work. So it's kind of, I'm always looking at, well, what can you do to be creative? Because that's part of what you're going to learn as well. It's not just the manual of how to be a paramedic, shall we say. But how you negotiate with things not working. Because that's very much the job anyway. So very much turning it around, and actually it really will be down to you. Sometimes I think the mindset is, well, it's you that's going to help us.
Yes, we're providing a service, so it's our responsibility for students to get their degree, but actually it doesn't work, does it, like that?
So somehow that's very interesting in Hong Kong, I teach in Hong Kong, they always pay. They've always paid for their education.
Okay.
Their culture is different, but when you give them the opportunity to send a full draft, they all send a full draft. To get the feedback to pass, they want those high marks. They do what you tell them to
That's
do.
interesting.
So they kind of follow the instruction and do.
Okay.
Whereas I think possibly there's a culture thing here, or well, if I don't do well, it's going to be your fault, not mine. Yeah. I think when money comes into it, if you're not used to paying for things, then it's different.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Just challenge the premise of your question in the beginning, not to be just to be devil's advocate. Have we got a skewed position on this because we're the weirdos who stay on at university? Most people don't. Most people leave as soon as they can. So maybe the surface approach is the norm, and we're the weirdos who take the deep approach.
Because you can get a degree with a surface. Well, it depends how the assessments are structured. For some assessments, you can pass and do quite well taking a surface approach to learning.
So the only reason I bring it up is that a consumer identity thing, or has there's always been surface learners and there will always be surface learners?
But isn't there a trend over time?
In the surface learning?
Well,
we only looked at that in the second survey.
So all just being devil's advocate, saying they may have exacerbated it, but I'm suggesting that perhaps...
so it could be that there's always been surface learners, and nowadays the surface learners identify as consumers, but in the past they've identified in a different way.
But what I'm also trying to suggest is we're the exception.
What you're saying is it's changed, sort of like I'm quite old, and when I first went to university, only 10% of the population would go.
Yes.
Whereas
Now it's more like 50%, isn't it?
So we probably, in years gone by, we did have deep learners, whereas now we're getting more surface learners.
But our marking criteria is all geared towards, in order to get a first, you need to show deep learning.
Yeah.
So you can pass with surface learning, but you don't expect to do a top grade.
The only reason I'm suggesting this is we could, if we had just got a whole huge cohort of surface learners and that's all they've done their entire life, I don't suppose there's a great deal you can do as an academic or as a university because that's what they've done.
What to think about? How are they going to go into their attitude then in employment? If employers are looking for creative, innovative, problem-solving students, then those students aren't going to have those skills, are they, necessarily? So it's not... We were talking about while getting sandwiches about the university and the campus environment. Is there anything you think that the university can do differently, or is problematic that the campus environment does about
I think they should monitor attendance and
monitoring attendance?
You know, let them see their attendance as well.
Yeah, that's controversial because it can be seen as big brotherish, but also at the same time.
Where it's not, where the students can see their attendance.
Yes.
So it's not just us with our secret registers.
No, and there are links between attendance and performance, and the students that attend more are going to do better. So, yeah, I think attendance is, I would be for attendance monitoring. We do it in our course anyway for bursary purposes, but I think it is a really important, it's just that bit of encouragement, isn't it? And yeah, if they do see they've got a full attendance record, it's kind of, that's an achievement as well. It's kind of motivating maybe.
Yeah, last night we had the release of our second year coursework, research methods. And so I ran some stats, and there was a 0.3 correlation between attendance, so number out of 10 sessions attended, and their mark. Yeah. Also 0.3 between their group mark of various tasks along the way and their final mark, but there wasn't a correlation between attendance and group marks, so those were separate things. So, because I guess a group mark could be carried by 1 or 2 good people.
Yes.
But, but the attendance, but probably then after that, those 1 or 2 good people are going to be the people who are attending.
Yeah. I mean, I went to an event at Aston University in Birmingham, and what struck me as I walked down this, and there's like a kind of main street in the campus, and just everywhere there were banners that had some form of statistic about this university is the best in this subject's the best in this, students, 99% of our students were employed in this course, and it was just kind of marketing slogan after slogan just everywhere. You couldn't escape it, and to me it just shouted out the marketisation of this university. We're a business, look how good we are, come here because we're great. And it was really quite, for me I really noticed it because I'm kind of interested in this topic, and I don't think that's the case at Brookes. I don't get such a strong sense of that.
The homepage is...
Well, actually, the webpage, you're right, maybe it's more online, but certainly on campus I don't get the feeling that it's not saying, there aren't stats in your face everywhere kind of selling us. Maybe there will be in the future. Okay, shall we move on? Yeah, so now I'm going to present Naomi's work on a second study, or another study we did. It wasn't a survey, this time it was looking at staff perceptions of students, and with a focus on how are staff perceiving student motivation and how does that impact on kind of staff perceptions of students and what staff are doing in the classroom with students. So this is looking at the perceptions and attitudes towards learning in undergraduate student consumers. We employed a theory of motivation called self-determination theory, and we know that students who have intrinsic motivations, who are motivated internally, for the desire to do something for the intrinsic enjoyment of doing it, they're going to have higher levels of achievement, higher satisfaction, and also higher well-being. So our question was, do academics perceive students as being intrinsically motivated to learn, or more motivated by external, extrinsic factors, such as the end goal of just getting a degree? And this is important to look at because pedagogic relations, the relations between students and lecturers, are shaped by their perceptions of each other. So if staff perceive students in a particular way, they're going to be delivering course content in a way that maybe encourages that very behaviour. So it's kind of can be a cyclical process whereby. So what academics think is really important because that can shape how students are behaving. So our aim is to consider academics' lived experiences of teaching students as consumers. What is it like in the classroom now for academics who are teaching students who are paying these £9,000 tuition fees, and to explore specifically how academics perceive student motivations for learning. Yeah, so we employed a theory that's been used extensively in educational settings, is a psychological theory of motivation called self-determination theory. There's been extensive research to support the idea that people need to experience fulfillment of 3 fundamental universal psychological needs in order to kind of achieve intrinsic motivation for doing things and to reach their full potential. So these 3 psychological needs are relatedness, autonomy and competence, and I'll explain what these 3 are next. So one way to think about this theory is to think of these 3 psychological needs at the bottom as being like the nutrients that support our growth and development and the ability to achieve our full potential. So autonomy is about having a sense of personal control, the ability to be yourself, to express yourself and to not be being dictated to or told what to do by other people. Competence is about having a sense of mastery and capability of doing those things that you want to achieve. It's not about, it's not about actual levels of competence. It's not about just getting a first-class degree. It's about feeling, I feel like I've really understood this topic, which I was really interested in. And you have a sense of achievement just through your own level of competence, as I say, irrespective of objective levels of competence. And then finally, relatedness is about having connections to other people who are supportive of you and are going to support your desires and things you want to achieve, and about feeling the sense of belonging as well. And importantly, this theory has a key role for external factors. So external factors can impact on the extent to which we experience fulfillment of our needs for autonomy, competence and relatedness. So the environment that we're in can support that or hinder it. So in terms of being in the classroom, as teachers we can help students to have a sense of autonomy, perhaps by giving them choices about how they go about studying or particular topics they go about studying, how they do their assessment. We can develop competence by giving supportive feedback that enables students to feel like they're achieving a sense of mastery. And we can help students to feel connected to a learning community by fostering good relationships between students and ourselves, and also between students with each other. So that was the framework we used. And what we did, we interviewed academics to, Naomi conducted 10 semi-structured interviews with academics. They were all studying, working at post-92 universities in England, teaching a broad range of subjects. It was kind of framed as just wanting to find out what they think about, what these academics think of today's students' attitudes and behaviours towards their learning. So I'm going to present the results now in terms of what we found. So we're looking specifically at how academics perceive students' motivation, and we've broken the results down into the 3 themes of autonomy, competence and relatedness to see how academics are perceiving students in these 3 ways. So first of all, 3 academics perceive students as experiencing fulfilment of their need for autonomy. And they partly attributed this due to their autonomy supportive teaching style. So one academic said, I don't teach answers, I teach students how to research, how to do critical thinking and analysis. So all of my assignments from first year to third year are based around broad topics that students can research to identify within that their own narrow topic. So really kind of autonomy supportive style of teaching that helps students to experience that intrinsic motivation for learning. However, 7 of the academics that we interviewed didn't experience students as fulfilling their need for autonomy. So here's a quote from one academic saying, I think they've lost the fact they should be studying themselves, developing themselves, reading around subjects. So kind of the opposite of that is being told what to do. Just do this, study this, answer this question, read this book, read this paper, and you'll pass the course. The restaurant analogy came up a few times. So it's a bit like coming to a restaurant. You don't expect that you're going to have to help the chef out. It's all going to be delivered, ready to your table. The only thing you have to do is fork it in your mouth. So they were using this analogy to describe how students have kind of lost this sense of autonomy. They're not internally motivated and have this desire to kind of be in control of their learning. They just want to be told what to do, given what to do, handed it on a plate and told to do this. Is that?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay. Do chip in there, Naomi.
Okay.
So these academics try to improve autonomy in their teaching practices and try to kind of help students to develop a sense of a desire to want to kind of follow pathways that they wanted to study themselves. But academics themselves felt they had limited control because of the limits that were imposed on their teaching freedom by some of the processes and systems that are in place for things like quality assurance. So we're obviously target driven. We have inquests and inquiries into why X, Y and Z module didn't go well. It's very stressful. We don't make any decisions without consulting with the academic manager, and that's chipping away at my professionalism. So this is kind of linked in with, if academics aren't feeling autonomous, then that's also not going to rub off on students. So again, it's when I asked us to think about what we can do in the classroom and how the university environment might be shaping us, it's clear from this that the external environment of the fees and universities having to kind of become like businesses is impacting on academics' own sense of personal freedom as well, which is then going to have a negative impact on fostering autonomy of students.
It's simply coming out as a vicious circle. This environment that the university, they kept talking about the top management teams. And so, well, the top management team, they really want the university to run as a business. And they think this is great. And so they're encouraging both the students to see themselves as consumers and the academics to see themselves as service providers. And a lot of the academics said it doesn't fit with our mindset. And it is just far, far too much admin work. And we've got to sort of audit every single thing we do. We've got all these targets and tick boxes to meet. And so it was starting to shape their mindset, put great pressure on them to actually teach in a way that they thought was creative. And so when they were confronted with a group of students who were thinking, I'm paying my money for this, I want good value and a good grade from it, they then felt very inhibited to be able to use a creative teaching style to push them a bit more and say, right, this is not what you're here for, and to encourage them to think about themselves and think about their identities. Because they were worried about some students saying, well, I don't agree with that. I just want you to come in and lecture and give me the facts and figures so I can bring this out in exams and pass. And they were concerned about complaints as well. And so they felt they didn't have the autonomy to say, no, I'm going to teach in this particular way. Because if the students then went to put in complaints, then they'd be dragged out to their managers and there's a vivid quote in one of the interviews. But it's just this fear of top-down pressure. And so the academics were sort of feeling they were squashed in the middle.
Yeah.
I think you have to I remember speaking to the first years on their first lecture last year, and going back to the previous slide, I said we're not going to spoon feed you. I said it, first lecture, first years, just get it out there at the front. And also they're all sat there in front of their laptop saying you can't get a degree by sitting behind one of those all the time. Just get those expectations out.
Yeah.
First day, of the 3 years, I think you just have to do that.
And
I mean, how are you going to go and complain after being in there for 5 minutes? But I think you should set those parameters out and you stick to them.
This is the came out of the interviews, was to get this into their heads right at the start, instead of having them sort of realising halfway through the course, actually.
Pussyfooting around it, not being bold and making a clear
Yeah.
statement about what you expect. I think that's how I do it. As far as I know, no one complains. So, but I think you just have to do that. So.
So moving on to competence now. Again, free academics perceive students as experiencing fulfilment of the need for competence. So here's a couple of quotes. One said, "I view all learners as competent. They are making the learning. I'm not making the learning for them." Another one said, "Academic standards are going up. The grades are better. The feedback from students is better as well. they do have the opportunity to become more critical in the way they think about the world. However, on the other side of that, there were academics we interviewed who did not perceive students as experiencing fulfilment of the need for competence. So one said, I think some of our students just don't understand what they don't know, so they have no concept of where they are or where they need to be. Part of it is a lack of willingness to take risk. Intellectual discovery doesn't necessarily feature in what they think they have to do. Another academic, I would push my students far more if I didn't have the cost of the National Student Survey behind me the whole time. But if the minute you start doing it there's going to be complaints, then you're not going to step out of line. So in a sense, you're encouraging this mediocrity. So these academics felt that the majority of those we interviewed felt that students just weren't necessarily experiencing fulfilment of competence because they felt restricted in developing a student sense of competence, because that meant pushing them and stretching them, whereas actually they were a bit scared to do that because students might complain if it's too difficult. So
I'm assuming that this is the same 3-7 split as on autonomy.
Was it always the same?
It ran all the way through.
Yes, it was the same 3.
There was one of the 7 who felt that their students lacked fulfilment of need for competence and autonomy. He felt that his students had good relatedness, but not the other 2.
Yeah.
But otherwise it was
but
all
generally the same 3 were more
positive.
positive. Yeah.
Was that institution-based?
Not particularly.
No, they're all different institutions,
All
aren't
different
they?
institutions. So the 3 who were very positive were all based in different institutions.
Yeah. So lastly, looking at the results in terms of relatedness, this was slightly more positive. So 4 of the academics perceived students as experiencing fulfilment of the need for relatedness. So here's a quote from one saying, they do learn from each other, and they say, wow, have you seen that? There's lots of that. Sometimes I say, where did you get that from? Can you teach me that? So they teach me as well, which is great. So this is talking about the relationships both between the students and between the member of staff and the students. Another academic said, we don't always have the capacity to provide regular face-to-face feedback for every student. So it's finding other ways to try and give that personal element to the sharing and understanding. So these were academics really committed to trying to kind of support relatedness and kind of instinctively see the importance of supporting that sense among their students. But 6 academics did not think that students were experiencing fulfilment of the need for relatedness. One said, a large amount of them think it's their right to demand what they want. They don't see it as a two-way partnership. Another said, I mean, they've paid their fees, and the way that I've seen it expressed is that students somehow feel that they have ownership over you in the way that you do something. So that's clearly not seeing the partnership. It's about students kind of paying our wages attitude, which then means that we're there to serve the students.
And a number of the academics said, I feel like my status has been diminished somehow. So being respectful towards academics, not overly blind or anything, but they don't engage with us on an equal level. It's almost as if they're looking down on us. They say, I want this, I want that, I want a response to my feedback, I want it in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, so seeing us again as service providers rather than partners in co-creating knowledge and learning. Yeah. And getting comments like, I pay your wages, I'm paying for my degree. They've lost that feeling of collegiality. So just to kind of finish off, what's your experience of student motivation in the classroom? Do you kind of identify as one of the 3 more positive of academics, or do you think that students are not experiencing autonomy and competence and relatedness? And how does that impact on what you do in the classroom and how you interact with students? So, anyone want to add any comments or thoughts about that?
I'm an eternal optimist, and every year
excellent.
This cohort will be better, and I try and make them engage with stuff, and then get disappointed that with the majority not getting on board, and then even the engaged ones then not necessarily performing as well as I'd hoped.
Oh, okay.
So next year.
Next year, try again next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think there's always there's a big range in the class that we work. Modules are 100 and something.
Right.
You know, and
Which department are you in?
Health and Life Sciences. So,
Okay.
I mean, this morning I did this with feedback, not a revision session for the exam coming up. You know, 10 students turned out 920.
Wow.
But those 10 students are really engaged.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to spend the time with
Yeah,
them, to talk
yeah.
to them, to help them out. They will help each other, so they're obviously,
Yeah.
but they're the good ones, and the
Yeah.
other ones.
Yeah, so
They're probably
you've
the
got
ones that need to
10%,
come.
haven't you?
Yeah.
So you teach to live.
Yeah.
Right, you live to teach. It's the 10 you live for, not the others.
Yeah.
Just have to say it's your choice.
Yeah, it is their choice, isn't it? So they do have autonomy in that sense of it's their choice. We don't force them to attend, but what's good for them.
I think that would be along the thing that I think we probably should have some attendance and lectures being enforced.
So what I was doing in our practical sessions is they're working in groups, and so each week I go around each group and say, okay, so it's group of 6, I can only see 4 of them, right? Who's not here? Did they tell you they weren't going to be here? So I'm not, there's no comeback, but it's just that I'm prioritising that if you're not here, you should tell your group that you're not here.
Yeah.
So just to,
So at least they're kind of communicating with each other and having a relationship with each other, as it were.
and having a sense of, yes, I do
community.
care whether they turn
Yeah.
up, and I
Yeah.
care whether they, if they
We
can't
noticed
turn up,
if they can't.
whether they told you.
Yeah.
I think there's something we haven't asked, and that I get a lot. If you do revision sessions, I mean, I did one of the week, and 10 turned out out of 30. If you ask the people why they didn't turn up, they'll say, oh, I've got other deadlines and things. So it's maybe not that they didn't want to be there, it's that they think they've
No,
got
it's
something
because
else
they
to
don't
do.
prioritise it. It's an optional session,
Yeah.
and they've got loads of other things, and so
So-
therefore they could have turned up, they could have done the work and turned up, but
Yeah, but maybe they've got something.
Like, last week I had the same situation, 130 and 40 turned up for the first bit, the actual essay practicing session, 6 stayed. And that's in week 11, which should be a lecture that they attend, it's not optional.
no, well, no, it is optional. It's optional
Like,
because it's not new material. That's what I mean. That they see.
We're not timetabling it outside of
No,
that.
I'm not talking about those sessions. I mean, I had 10 practicals, all in the same slots, and the 2 with the lowest attendance were the peer review one, but that was fairly good because there was a penalty if they didn't at least submit a draft. And then the mock, which where attendance went from 85% to 90% down to 50%.
But with me, if I ask them, they say, it's good I've got a crit next week.
Yeah.
So that was on my mind more than coming along to an essay revision session for an essay that's after the crit. It will just be that so their motivation is the next most important deadline, not the one after that. And I think
it's linked to time management.
but the students are terrible at time management.
And this is a problem when they get into work and they're...
But that's different from motivation, isn't it? That's a separate issue, I would say. I think they are motivated by the next deadline.
I think it probably falls under competence in terms of general skills that they want to take out of university and actually use in their lives and their workplaces. And if they don't have time management and they think, I've got to prioritise this, but then they give up on other sessions which could help them even more in the long run. I think that would be competence, just general living skills.
My experience is kind of varied. If I take the example of students on supervising for their dissertation, so bearing in mind they've got deadlines, this is semester 1, plus they have to start putting in the background of dissertation because that completes in March. So the group that I've had, they're all different in how they're motivated. Some, I want to get half of this done in semester 1, even though you've got the other deadlines. Some of them say, actually, it's not my priority is to get that assignment done, that practical done, then I'm going to concentrate solely on this. But that could be their way of time managing or prioritising. But I think they're still motivated, but in a different way. But then some kind of need a little bit of, well, when you have someone that goes, I don't know, there has to be a little conversation that comes in, okay, what do you mean by that? You have to explore it. And that can spark a bit of motivation, but sometimes overwhelm gets in the way as well. So my experience at present with the paramedic students, for example, is they are motivated, but in different ways and different times. So come next.
So it's a fluid thing that changes over time, doesn't it?
I now sort of reflect, and they're motivated in different ways. What motivates one may not be able to get it all done now. I don't think so. No, I want to do it there. That's my mindset. So I also noticed that a sense of maturity coming along with each group. I don't know if that's anyone else's experience of that, but it seems like every cohort that comes in seems to have a different level. Now that might change because they're now paying.
So in paramedics, you have small. What's the cohort size?
50.
50.
50 to 55.
Okay.
So I mean, not the 100 and I appreciate that's a different dynamic, but still a fair amount to deal with. But I don't know. I think motivation sometimes it's there, sometimes you have to. Okay, so what's in the way now? Because you were motivated last week. There's a bit of exploring to do, and I do see that they see the value of that. When nothing comes back, well, you haven't helped me, or no one's really said that to me before. So sometimes a little bit intuitive at times, and sometimes it really is, you haven't done anything. Do something, come back. So I don't know, I see differences in motivation all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, just for time, I think we'll draw it to a close. So just really thank you all for coming, for participating, for having some really lively discussions. I want to end with a quote back from Socrates again, saying I think really what we should do is not teach we can't teach our students anything, we can teach them to think, and I think that's what our goal should be going forward. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe you should start that slide with students.